The boy is digging in the wrong direction. That is the first thing Hector Aldridge notices on a Tuesday morning. Jakob Sorensen, 19 years old, possesses wide shoulders and narrow patience. His hair is stiff with frozen sweat. He is digging into the hillside with a fury that looks less like construction and more like an argument. Hector pulls his horse to a stop, breathes out a white cloud. Boy, what in the devil are you building? Jakob's shovel rings against a buried stone. He hurls it aside and keeps going. Barn. He says, that ain't where you build a barn. Jakob replies, it is where I build mine. Hector rides on. By the time Hector reaches the feed store in Harlow, the story is already forming. Jakob is a badger. The men at the feed store laugh with him. None of them think about it again until December. They will think about it in December. They will think about very little else. Jakob Sorensen is alone in the particular way of prairie children, defined by the arithmetic of loss. His mother died of fever when he was 11, leaving him with a hollow, windswept house. Nils Sorensen died in March, pneumonia, turning his stubborn breath into a final icy silence. Jakob inherits 240 acres, a gap-filled barn, 11 cattle, and a massive debt. $412 is not a number in 1893. It is a life sentence. Elias Drummond gives Jakob until spring, bring the cattle through winter, or lose the land. April means animals alive and sellable. Failure means the bank takes everything Jakob owns. Jakob does the arithmetic on brown flour sack paper in the gray light of September. Losing 3 cattle means failure. Losing 5 means he is finished. The numbers are cruel. Old men whisper of 1886, the year cattle died, standing in the frozen fields. A drafty timber barn with fist-sized gaps will not save cattle from the coming freeze. Nils Sorensen watched the grassland go gold, recalling Norwegian farmers who built into the earth. The earth provided warmth. The wind could not reach. Nils meant to build it. Nils ran out of time, leaving much undone. Jakob is determined not to follow. Jakob begins digging on October 8th. The north face soil is still workable, not yet frozen. He marks a rectangle 14 by 22 feet, digging deep into the sloping hillside. Using a carpenter's pencil on brown paper, he follows a drawing others wouldn't understand. The structure features 3-foot earthen walls with the hillside pressing against its back. A 6-foot deep floor sits under a lodgepole pine roof, layered with 18 inches of sod. The principle is older than Montana. Jakob calls it Jordvarm, earth. Warmth. Soil is itself a form of shelter. A timber frame fights the cold with whistling drafts. A buried structure holds and accumulates stored summer heat. Inside isn't room temperature, but it isn't the -40 of the open air. It is survival. Jakob has 11 cattle, a sledgehammer, shovels, a pickaxe, and $37 in a terrified coffee tin. He spends $11 on lodgepole pine hauled by a Swede named Arn who asks no questions. He spends $4 on lime and sand for mortar. He buys a used draw knife for 60 cents. He debarks the lodgepoles by lantern light after digging. His hands crack and bleed from the dry cold. The smell of fresh-cut pine fills the hollow. Pine sap turned earth, and the cool mineral breath of soil. A seam of clay-heavy subsoil brings the first setback. The shovel makes almost no progress for 2 days. The clay grabs the shovel and holds it. Jakob tries the pickaxe, and soaking the ground with water, he builds a fire inside the cut to break the clay. It costs him 2 days, and would Hector Aldridge sees the smoke. Now he's burning the hill. Nils's boy has lost his mind completely. Several men watch as Jakob, covered in clay to his elbows, hair stiff with sweat, works on what you gonna do when the hill collapses on your cows. A man calls out mockingly, I'll let you know, Jakob says, and goes back to work, turning from their laughter. The second setback is structural. Jakob lays 14 lodgepoles across the earthen walls to frame the roof. The center span flexes under a test load of snow. Jakob calculates the need for a ridgepole support. He has 1 good lodgepole left. He prepares an 8-foot center post to set on a flat stone. Alone in the gray afternoon, He braces the post with his shoulder, while kicking the stone level on the fourth try. The post stands true, the roof frame stops flexing, and goes rock solid. Jakob sits on the clay floor, face in his hands. From the pure crushing physical exhaustion, he counts to 10, gets up, and goes back to work. His body is pushed past its limit. Neighbors watch as he lime washes the earthen walls, sealing them against moisture and crumbling soil. He fits flat river stones into the floor, ensuring the ground's heat transfers directly into the shelter. He checks the stone floor with his bare hand. The surface reads 52 degrees, warm to the touch. That warmth comes from 8 feet below, from soil that the blizzards cannot reach. They watch him cut sod from the meadow, 3-inch slabs of grass-rooted earth, heavy as lead. The sod goes on in layers, offset like northern European steppe houses. For 1,000 years, the roof is 18 inches thick, and the hill barely looks disturbed by his work. Martha Aldridge stops at the fence with preserved peaches and an expression of doubtful kindness. It's going to cave in, Jakob. All that weight will come down on your animals. It's held for 1,000 years in Norway. This ain't Norway, no, it's colder. He eats peaches alone, watching November close in from the north, like a drawing curtain. $18, left 2 months before the banknote, a structure no one believes in. On November 3rd, Jakob checks. The temperature outside is 21 degrees. Inside the shelter, it is 23 degrees warmer. Before animals arrive, Jakob stares at the numbers, his father's logic finally proving true. The 11 cattle enter on November 8th, their warm sides pressing together in the lantern-lit dimness. The animals act as furnaces. Within an hour, the internal temperature rises to 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside, the temperature hits 14 degrees and falls. Jakob latches the heavy timber door. Cold comes in waves. By mid-December, it hits 8 below zero, freezing. Farmhouse windows solid. Jakob sleeps in layers of blankets and his father's coat, checking the shelter twice nightly. Each time he checks, the shelter holds 47 degrees 52 on the restless nights. Jakob checks the walls for moisture and adds 12 inches of straw to the floor. He builds an earthen wind trap vestibule just inside the door to block low-flowing cold air. That night, the temperature rises 3 degrees. On December 15th, Hector Aldridge returns. Hector looks at Jakob with the expression of a man revising something he thought settled. Your animals doing all right? Hector asks. Jakob responds, all 11. A heavy pause follows. Hector's barn is failing. His Holsteins suffer, while Jakob's dugout maintains 50 degrees in the freeze bank. Your exterior walls with earth. Jakob says, high as you can before it freezes solid. Even 2 feet of packed earth against the timber drops wind penetration. By half use, sod, it won't be what I've got, but it'll keep more of your animals. Through Hector nods, says nothing else, and rides away into the gathering gloom of December. The blizzard arrives on December 22nd, 1893, without a single courtesy of warning. Jakob wakes at 4 to a roar coming through the farmhouse floor and walls. At the window, he cannot see the barn or fence, only a solid wall of white. He dresses in everything he owns and goes out into the physical blow of the cold. The porch thermometer reads 31 degrees below zero. The cold is a physical object. Northwest winds scream at 40 miles per hour, creating a lethal horizontal world of ice. Wind chill represents minus 62 degrees Fahrenheit. In that yard, survival is the only thought. He makes it to the shelter in 4 minutes. He fights the wind for every step, bent at the waist, levering the timber latch. He pushes inside. The transition is violent. Chaos to absolute stillness. The wind vanishes into a muffled rumble. He stands in the vestibule, waiting for his senses to calibrate. He pushes through the inner door. 11 cattle are present, unsettled, but not in distress. The mercury thermometer reads 47 degrees outside. It is 31 below zero with lethal winds. The shelter is 109 degrees warmer than standing in the yard. He stays 2 hours, moving among the animals. The lodgepole frame does not creak. The earthen walls do not shift. He returns to the farmhouse. On the second day, 50-mile-per-hour winds make the yard impassable on foot. He ties a spare lariat from farmhouse to shelter, crawling through waist-deep drifts to make the connection hand over hand. Along the rope he crosses blind in the white he is a dark shape. In a void, the storm runs for 3 days. Jacob logs temperatures every 6 hours. On the brown flour sack paper, outside air hits 38 below zero. Inside, the earthen sanctuary holds at a steady 48 degrees. He checks it twice, holding the thermometer to the lantern to verify the mercury isn't stuck 48 degrees inside, while outside hits 38 below 86 degrees warmer, fueled only by the earth itself. Jacob doesn't know that Hector's east wall has collapsed inward under the weight of snow. And when 2 Holsteins are killed, the Pearsons lose their flock. Animals lie down in the cold. Forever Widow Hayes's cow froze, standing. Old Carl Drummond's water pipes burst, flooding his kitchen with ice. Carl sleeps beside his draft horses for warmth. On the 4th day, the blizzard finally ends. Jacob checks the shelter as Hector appears at the fence, his face stripped of its usual ease. Lost too. Holstein's Hector says wool came in. Something honest is now in the man's eyes. I'm sorry, Jacob says. Hector asks about the animals. Jacob replies all 11. Hector looks at the sod roof, barely distinguishable from the hill, a mound treated with blizzard indifference. Jacob retrieves the thermometer and returns 46. He says Hector looks at the sky. It's 12 above out here. Jacob replies, it's been that way since November. Silence follows. The silence is that of a man doing arithmetic he should have done months earlier. Can you show me for next year? Hector asks. Jacob leads him through the shelter. Jacob explains the thermal mass. The earth is a reservoir of warmth, a slow battery, a structure built into the earth borrows heat that no wind can ever steal. The 6-foot depth puts the floor at stable ground temperature, away from freeze-thaw cycles. 18 inches of sod provides insulation, slowing thermal transfer far more dramatically than timber. Hector listens without speaking. He puts his hand flat against the earthen wall, feeling the impossible warmth, feeling the slight give of the lime-washed surface, feeling the faint warmth bleeding from the hillside. Your father knew this, Hector says. Jacob replies he knew. He didn't get to build it. Frank Pearson appears at the fence, hat in hand, asking how to survive the next storm. A red-bearded Swede stands looking at the hillside. My grandfather built something like this, he whispers. Elias Drummond arrives in a trap buggy, expression neutral, asking to see the boys. Operation Drummond looks at 11 living cattle. He does the arithmetic of survival and bank notes. 45 degrees. Drummond says. Jacob explains it held 47 during the lethal blizzard. Drummond is quiet for a moment. That's a difference of 85 degrees. By air alone. Jacob simply replies yes. In a structure with no stove. Yes. Jacob responds with a quiet certainty that requires no further explanation. Drummond looks at the earthen walls, the sod ceiling, and the cattle, who look back with patient, incurious gazes. I'll be extending your note terms. Drummond says it is the closest thing to an apology he can produce. That night alone in the farmhouse, Jacob looks at his records on the flour sack paper. 11 animals survived. $37 spent against a structure that outperformed every timber barn in the county. The earth is generous to those who know how to receive its generosity, not through fire, but understanding. Jacob thinks of his father on the narrow bed, watching the autumn grassland turn to gold. He remembers the drawings made from memory, something Nils's own father had described from a Norwegian valley. In a Norwegian valley, animals wintered safely, while storms leveled the exposed farms on the ridges. That knowledge was lost in the Atlantic crossing, sacrificed to the urgency of building quickly. There is a poverty in knowing only the most recent answers. The earth has been warm. The earth kept things warm before there were things to be kept warm. This knowledge belongs. He writes nothing down. He doesn't need to. The structure on the hillside is the record. It will stand through spring and autumn. He will show anyone who comes to learn. In spring 1894, Jacob brings 11 healthy cattle to market, and pays his note in full. Jacob buys lime and sand to help Hector build a shelter for his sickly daughter. They dig into the south face of Aldridge Hill in April. While the ground is workable, they work together without mockery, using the language of shovel stone and lodgepole pine. They work in a language the earth has spoken longer than anyone has had ears. The structure stands, frost rims the door, but the interior temperature remains perfectly stable. The old knowledge holds quietly under their boots without even needing to be believed in. That is the nature of a thing true enough to wait.